All right, Matt Johnson from the Dirt. It's amazing that you're joining us today. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Jake.
So, from what I understand, you grew up in Stratford, so you're what we consider a local boy.
Yes, yes, and I still live in East London. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in New York and Sweden and Spain, but East London is where I always seem to return to.
And I hear that you're a local to the same pie and mash shop that's closest to me,
Is that the Noted?
Noted with
Yes.
Peter and Alfie.
Yes, that is a family favourite. Because as kids growing up, they previously had a place in Bow Road, I believe.
Yep. Yep.
And my dad loved that. And so we'd often be driving past and he'd stop, rush out to get the pie and mash. And then when they moved, he followed them there. And I went often with my dad and my brothers. And sadly, my dad died a couple of years ago now. But my brother, my surviving brother, there was four of us and there's only two of us left, brothers. And my other brother, my younger brother and I, we still go there quite a lot. And it brings back a lot of memories. You know, we really like it there. And there's a few we go to, but that's probably our favourite.
Brilliant. That means so much. What I find interesting is the memories it brings back, the associations. There's this real feeling of nostalgia with pie and mash.
Yes.
And I wonder, what can you describe what it is to you that keeps you coming back again and again?
Well, I suppose in the most meaningful sense of the word, it's a comfort food because it's something that I grew up with. Childhood in East London, my relatives all still have it. And my first memories of going to a pie and mash shop would have been the one in Stratford Broadway, which was just over the road from the Two Puddings, which I believe was it a Cockney's, that one? Cockney's pie and mash? I
don't know that one.
I can't remember. There was the most famous ones were obviously Cook's, Kelly's, Manze's, but I can't remember the name of the one in Stratford, but I remember going there as a kid. But also, our mum and dad bringing it home. They may have picked it up, so it would be a takeaway food. It was a very early form of pies generally in London, an early form of fast food, I suppose, in a way, working class food.
Yeah.
Before you even had the pie and mash shops, you had pie sellers wandering the streets, and that's before they could afford premises. So this goes back hundreds of years. So it was a very affordable form of nutrition and nourishment for working class Londoners. And so that tradition really grew out of that. And for me, I've had times in my life where I haven't had pie and mash because I was a vegetarian for a number of years in the 1990s. And so I didn't have it then. But through childhood, my teens, growing up, and then after I, fell off the vegetarian wagon, which at some point I may get back on again, I don't know, rediscovered my love of it. Liquor, the vinegar, pepper, and also just being it. The pie and mash shops themselves are so beautiful. The tiling, the marble tops. And one thing that always strikes me is how compact the seating is, because people in Victorian times tended to be a bit smaller, and so they feel quite small. And I love the fact that a lot of them still have the original tables and chairs. Yeah. Another one we used to go to was Manze's in Chapel Market, which sadly closed over the last year. We like that one. Manze's in Bermondsey is another favourite one, and it's interesting.
Oh, that's a good one on the corner, isn't it? It's on the corner.
It's lovely. It's very, very. Well, they're all quite old-fashioned looking, but the pastry varies from pie and mash shop to pie and mash shop. And I noticed the one in Manze's in Bermondsey is slightly sort of crispier somehow. But one of the other things I love about pie and mash is the pies. Regular pies, you get all these, these modern day pie shops. They're just not the same because you've got the moist, steamed sort of suet base of the pie, and the crispy top, and the meat has a certain flavour and texture and a certain amount of seasoning, I suppose. And then with the mashed potato, the liquor, of course, which I really love, which is the parsley sauce, boiled down, so it's got a very thick, unusual texture. And you've got to have the vinegar and the pepper on it as well. I never cared for eels. My dad used to love jellied eels, and I was always a bit squeamish about that, particularly when you would see them in some of the pie and mash shops. You'd see all the live eels at the front, and they would chop them all up in front of you.
Yeah.
As a little boy, and the bits of the eel were still wriggling, I found it quite quite disturbing. But yeah, so it always feels a bit of a sense of occasion, although it's a very, or relatively cheap, simple, working fast food. I love the atmosphere in pie and mash shops. They're very unpretentious. There's a link with our history there. The smells and the flavors bring back lovely childhood memories for me.
Oh, it's so nice to hear. It's funny you were talking about it being a fast food, because I was just speaking to John Rogers, and he makes the comparison between chicken shops and pie and mash shops. And I won't go into that, but having spoken to John, I said, I'm going to be speaking to Matt Johnson from The. I know you're a fan of The. What would you want me to ask Matt? And he said, look,
if you're talking to Matt Johnson about subjects with, like nostalgia, East End, the past, you've got to ask him for anecdotes about growing up in the Two Puddings, because he must have some stories. In fact, I know he's got some stories about that.
There are a lot. There's many in the book, obviously, and I was a little boy at the time. But there's quite a disturbing one that springs to mind, which was a bit of a near-death experience for me, because there was my brothers and I would spend a lot of time playing around the pub during closing time, particularly in the afternoon, and investigating. There's something quite magical about places that are normally filled with people and life, when they're suddenly silent and they're dark. You have the old smell of the tobacco, the beer, last night's perfume and aftershave. So there's something quite haunting. It's full of ghosts. And we would often play in the cellar. And it was a very old building, and I think the building that ended up being the building that is still there today, which houses Two Puddings, I think it was built on even older structures. And so I believe that the foundation is very, very old, because the cellar itself had a very, very low ceiling. It was very dark and had a very distinct smell down there. And my brother and I would play down there a lot, hiding in different rooms and exploring. And at one point, my phone. At one point, I was down there with my brother, and I was treading on something. Something gave way, like a sort of drain area, and I went flying into it, and just was hanging on. And I could have been washed down into the sewers, and I was hanging on by my fingertips. And Joe Hobson, who was one of the barmen there, managed to rush down. My brother must have sounded the alarm, and I managed to hang on, and he pulled me out, and I was covered from head to toe in this muck. And I remember distinctly then being taken upstairs, and my mum put me in the bath and showering me down. But I came very, very close to being just, dangerous. I mean, nowadays you have very strict health and safety laws, but that sort of thing wouldn't be allowed now. But the world was more of a adventurous, dangerous place in those days. And so very, 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 very nearly I got washed down the sewers and carried away down the River Thames, or wherever it led to, I suppose. But the pub itself was quite magical. It was a very, very one of East London's busiest pubs in the '60s, and it was one of the top music venues in East London. So there was a lot of famous bands that would play there, like the Small Faces or the Kinks and the Who, probably. And my Uncle Kenny, my dad's younger brother, was a top London music promoter at the time. And so the strongest memory for me, pleasant memory this is, not the unpleasant one like nearly being carried away down a drain pipe, was the sound of music drifting up through the floorboards all the time. So it was a very, very lively pub. We heard wonderful music all the time, either from the jukebox or live bands playing. And so that was probably the reason I got into music, because I was sort of saturated by a lot of vibrant music from a very early age, the age of 1.
I mean, it feels quite trivial speaking to someone of your musical caliber about pie and mash, but actually...
No, but I like, it's a fan, and the reason I'm fond of Zach, obviously, but also I liked your book. I thought it was lovely, very lovingly made, and a lovely website to go with it. But it's a family tradition. And my family, there's a lot of humour and warmth and fun in my family, quite a large extended family, lovely relatives. and we all liked pie and mash, and it was a tradition. It was something, you know, we would do with our dad in recent years, right up until he died, really. So it was an important part of our family story, and it's great that there is a younger generation appreciating it, and that there are still a lot of good pie and mash shops hanging in there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of different people within the pie and mash industry on this as part of this event, and it's like a really big, sprawling, positive celebration of pie and mash. And so it's brilliant that you joined us.
Yes,
and it's really nice to hear your stories.
yes.
Thank you. This virtual event kind of replaces, we've had a pie and mash lock-in. So next year, when all of this is behind us, hopefully, we're going to do another pie and mash lock-in. So I'll make sure and let you know.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Nice to talk to you.